Thank you very much, Seanad Éireann. Minister, like everyone else, I'd like to welcome you to this House and congratulate you on your recent appointment in what will be a very challenging but no doubt rewarding position as we face into economic uncertainty on the horizon. And very briefly, Seanad Éireann, I'd like to congratulate you on your recent appointment as well. I didn't get the opportunity to do it last week, but you follow in the footsteps of a pretty impressive predecessor, which was Senator Paul Coughlin, who is Seanad Éireann. Minister, I think we can all agree that on New Year's Eve 2019, when we were ringing in 2020, none of us would imagine what we were about to face into. None of us could imagine the unprecedented economic and social challenge that COVID-19 was going to present to us. And I think that's why, Minister, this bill is actually particularly important, because it's putting the structures in place that will allow member states within the European Union to, most importantly, protect workers and, most importantly, protect jobs in the face of economic uncertainty. And when I was reading through the legislation in the briefing notes last night, Minister, I was particularly interested in what a number of colleagues have already referenced, which is the support to mitigate unemployment risk and emergency, or the SURE instrument for brevity. And under the proposal, as has been mentioned previously, the SURE instrument is going to allow up to €100 billion to be provided to member states. And that financing will allow member states to, I suppose, essentially strategically tackle any sudden increases in public expenditure that will come along as a result of COVID. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that, and that it's going to provide member states with that type of flexibility, I suppose, to be able to react quite quickly. I'm also very pleased to see that under that SURE scheme, when we look in member states about what could and could not be eligible, it appears that the temporary wage subsidy scheme may be eligible for loan support. And I think this is quite important. And this is what I want to focus the remainder of my contribution on, which is the TWSS scheme, Minister. As with all legislation, I suppose, that has been passed by parliaments around the world in relation to COVID, there's a real effort to try and get it through our houses as quickly as possible. And I accept that, because at the end of the day, it's for the good of our country that we do it as quickly as possible. But what has come to my attention in relation to the TWSS in the last couple of weeks was brought to me by a small business in County Louth. It's a family-run business that employs 4 or 5 family members. They had an accountant previously, and one of the family members decided to take over the running of the accountancy, which you will know well yourself, themselves. And in the process of it, and in the handing over of accountants, they weren't on the wage, they weren't on the Colsoft wage packet on February 29th, which the legislation has said quite clearly that you have to be on the wage packet on that particular date. All of their wages were then put in 10 weeks later, but it was after the date. Now, both I and the family have really pushed this through the proper channels within Revenue, through the proper appeal channels. And Revenue have come back and been quite clear, and they've said, look, we're sorry, this is the legislation that has been passed by the House of Oireachtas. The date is the 29th. We can't do anything about that. So, Minister, what I would say is I would ask you and your department to perhaps look at these anomalies that have been created, not through anyone's fault, but just through technicalities. And companies like this family-run business in County Louth have actually just fallen through the gap as a result. And I would say that, as I said there, I would hope that the government can deal with those. A couple of examples, perhaps next week, in the stimulus package next week. And to conclude, Minister, I actually think it provides a timely reminder to us that as we do try to get legislation through this House as quickly as possible to take on the fight against COVID, that we should be able to consider it and look back on it a couple of weeks later and produce any amendments or anything like that in subsequent legislation that can really tackle issues like this that I've raised about, to really help and support small family businesses. And to conclude about it, and I'm sure many members in this House will agree with me, I do think it is inherently unfair that where we are putting in so many financial packages for people throughout this whole country, that through a technicality and through legislation being black and white, that a good, hard, honest, decent working family are falling through the gap. And I would really hope we can rectify it. So I wish you well in your job to come, and thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Senator.